basketball, getting their jobs taken away from them. There has to be some blame somewhere. And I mean, again, you go to this game 7 on one of the first possession for Boston. If you're a Boston sports fan, if you're a Celtics fan, you can take some blame on the fact that Jason Tatum rolls his ankle in the very first possession. You can tell that had an effect on him the entirety of the game. But you look at that stat line. I mean, Tatum only had 14. Derek White stepped up and put up 18 points, which, again, I mean, that's good for him. But when there's no other help around from the rest of your team, you look at the 3-point shooting that entire game, it was terrible. I mean, it was let me pull it up real quick. I mean, it was probably some of the worst 3-point shooting in a playoff game that I've ever seen. But if you are if you are Joe Mazzulla, if you are somebody who's in the camp that thinks that keeping Mazzulla is the right thing to do, you have that help in the sense that this wasn't the perfect game, and it wasn't the perfect game because of things that were out of his control. There's still no excuse for going down 3 on the series, despite the fact that you were able to come back and go to a game 7. Again, you look at that series against Atlanta, keeping that way closer, going to a game 6, which Atlanta was no place to be there in the first place, at least against the Celtics. And then, of course, going to game 7 against Philadelphia. Again, a series that could have gone a very, very different way if it wasn't for the fact that Jason Tatum showed up in the fourth quarter of game 6. Again, all I'll say is that I don't think it's going to happen this year, but there will come a time where I think they will look in a different direction. That's all I've got to say about Joe Mazzulla. I think, again, it's so hard to judge him as a first-year head coach, but there's now a standard set from Ime Udoka being part of his coaching staff and knowing that this team has the potential, has the power to go farther. But to go back to your question about Jaylen Brown too, I think it's hard to see the guy leave. I think he's in a position where he wants to stay in Boston. It's almost giving me the same feeling that the early Golden State Warriors teams had, where it seems like this team does want to stay together. It doesn't really seem like there's any massive issues with the team chemistry. But then I've also heard situations about Jaylen Brown signing the max contract with the Celtics and then being traded away for the 3rd overall pick going to Portland, which I think it would be Anthony Simmons in the 3rd overall pick. I don't like that decision. If you're Boston, I think you got to keep this core.
I love that decision.
You do?
Yeah, I really do.
I don't know. I think you got to keep that core.
I think Jaylen Brown, we discussed this after last finals run, Cade. Is he a superstar? Is he a star? Is he just a regular player? I don't know. Last night, I don't want to be prisoner of the moment, but after that game 7, when Jason Tatum gets hurt and Jaylen Brown, we need one game out of you. We need a game 7 out of you. Last series, it was Jason Tatum that dropped 51. Now it's your opportunity to shine. Comes out, has 8 points in the first quarter, ends the game with sorry, I don't have this box score in front of me. 19 points, 8 for 23 shooting, 8 rebounds. This dude can't dribble to save his life. He can't playmate. I don't know if he can be your number 2 option, Cade. I think we're at that question.
Well, the thing is that because you have Marcus Smart still, Malcolm Brogdon's coming off the bench, so you're not going to keep him as a number 2. But there's other. I don't think that Boston sees him as a number 2. I think they see him as a second option, but there's multiple second options for this team. And I mean, he was still your leading scorer yesterday. I mean, you look at that entire team for yesterday's game again, putting up what?
That doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter necessarily. They got blown out, but you're talking. I mean, the argument you're making is that the way that he played yesterday isn't necessarily deserving of what should be that second option. But you look at the rest of the team. I mean, Marcus Smart only put up 9 points. Tatum, again, with the injury, 14. Al Horford, 8. They went 9 for 24 or 9 for 42 from 3-point. 20. I mean, that's 21% right there. I get what you're saying. I mean, even then, you look at the way. The one biggest concern I see out of Jaylen Brown in this situation is the fact that his turnover ratio was absolutely. I mean, he was turning over the ball like it was just free candy at that point yesterday. But again, to look at yesterday in particular and see the way he played, it doesn't matter. I mean, I agree. Him being the leading scorer and putting up 19 points doesn't necessarily mean anything, but the entire team played so poorly that looking at his individual stat line, I don't think is enough to say that he isn't that number 2 option.
Okay, but if we're just looking at it, at how can we get better as a team? Maybe it's try and give Jason Tatum a point guard. Jason Tatum, who can give you 30 a night, but does have like, or he averages a cool 4 assists as well. Assists, he'll grab his rebounds too, but he's really not too much of a playmaker. He struggles with the turnover battle. I think he led all players in the series with 26 against the Heat. I remember last year on the finals, on that playoff run, he averaged like 100 turnovers. Second most was like Jaylen Brown, I believe, and he had like 76. So these guys just turn the ball over. Maybe if you get Jason Tatum, the true number one option, we've seen him do it. I don't know if is he a superstar, Kate? Can we call him superstar?
Jason Tatum?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Definitely. I don't know if
Oh,
he's
yeah.
definitely a superstar.
I don't know. I think when you're talking about just all the superstars in the league, he's in that lower echelon of superstars, but he's still a superstar.
Okay, fair enough. If you get so you're calling him a superstar. I don't know if I'm
Yes.
just quite there just yet. But if you give him Damian Lillard, Jason Tatum, who hasn't had a point guard his entire career in Boston. I remember it started off with Kyrie, and then it goes to Brad Wanamaker and was Isaiah Thomas. It's just off the top of my head, Kate. But I feel like he hasn't had a point guard his entire time in Boston, giving pairing him up with Damian Lillard, who can play, make, create, hit the big shot. He's a veteran. He's been in the playoffs before. I think that makes a lot of sense for to just looking to improve, because maybe if you get Jaylen Brown again, you run it back. How much better can you really get? You're just gonna pay more money. That's gonna take him more out of your cap. Might as well try something new. Pair JT with Dame, and let's get this going.
Oh, like I mean, okay. Well, if you throw Dame into the conversation, then I agree. I would 100%. As of now, looking at winning a championship in 2024, I would make the trade to send Jaylen Brown to Portland if it means getting Damian Lillard. But that's
Okay.
not going to be
Oh,
the.
you were
That's
talking
not
about
going to be.
the 3 pick and Simmons, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And that's what I think that
Okay.
trade would be. I think it would be Jaylen Brown for the third pick and Simmons, which in that situation, how much I mean, you look at this draft class this year, it's going to be a stacked draft class no matter what. At the third pick, you're not going to be getting Wembayana, but you're still going to be having the chance at somebody like Scoot Henderson, who, again, isn't necessarily a guy that you can really put a lot of trust into yet, just because we haven't seen him in the league. But he's going to go out there, and I mean, again, it's hard to say that he's 100% going to be a certified bucket, but he's going to be a good basketball player, and it's time will tell how that will kind of switch up. But in the moment, if you're talking about winning a championship right now, yes, if you can get Dame, definitely make that happen. I would get 100%. If I was in Boston's shoes, I would 100% give up Jaylen Brown for Damian Lillard. But that's not, I mean, that trade isn't going to happen. They're not going to make that trade. It's going to be for that third pick in Simmons. And I just don't see that trade really working out in the favor of Boston in the moment. Now, of course, as mentioned, you get that third pick, you pick up a guy like Scoot Henderson. You are getting a point guard that could possibly be that next generational talent. But by the time he's ready to actually make it to a true NBA Finals appearance, who knows where the rest of this team is going to be? I mean, Marcus Smart might be gone. Jason Tatum probably won't be gone. I think that's a guy that Boston will plan on keeping long term. But I think there's a little more uncertainty with that right there. Whereas if you keep Jaylen Brown right now, you went to the NBA Finals last year. You lost in 7 games to the Eastern Conference Finals this year, and you showed those kind of points where this team has that potential to really go on these deep runs. And it showed during the regular season, showed in the Eastern Conference Finals. Despite the loss, they're still able to rattle 3 off and push it to a game 7. There's a little more, I guess, certainty where that team is right now. And as of now, they haven't lost it. I mean, they haven't won an NBA Finals, but they haven't necessarily lost in a fashion that would make anybody in Boston seem concerned. So as of now, I think you got to keep Jaylen Brown, see what maybe you can work with around the bench just to see if maybe there's some other help. I mean, you look at that, maybe try finding another center other than Al Horford. I'm not like he's all right, but I don't think he's necessarily a huge pickup. But you look at the rest of that lineup: Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Derek White, and Jaylen Brown. You're looking at a lot of guys that are very inconsistent, but a lot of guys that also have the talent to get you to a 57-25 regular season record and push you to a game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, fair enough. You talked me into it. I have been a Jaylen Brown fan. I don't know if I'm necessarily sold on this duo yet, but like you said, there are still ways that they can improve. Maybe that's like you said, getting a center that can shoot the three like Al Horford, maybe a little bit faster, better defensively. Robert Williams, get him more minutes. I know he was sick in Game 7. That's probably why he played less minutes, but I mean, he was shooting at an efficient rate throughout that Miami series. So yeah, not completely sold. I want to touch a little bit, or not completely sold on the Celtics, but I want to touch a little bit on the Heat. Cade, we've been wrong on the Heat all playoffs long. They proved us wrong. I said beginning of this series, I thought they were eventually going to cool off from 28th in the regular season in 3-point percentage. Now in the playoffs, first among all teams at 39% from deep. This team has just been red hot. Caleb Martin was unstoppable in Game 7 throughout the series. I thought Kyle Lowry played a pretty good Game 7. What do you want to get into with this Heat team, Cade?
I think the first thing you've got to get into with this Heat team is the fact that they have a very, very deep roster with a bunch of guys that a lot of people weren't expecting to get to where they're at right now. I mean, as you mentioned, Caleb Martin putting up 26 last night, just playing lights out basketball this series, and being a guy who was undrafted. I mean, Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are the two guys that I think a lot of casual fans look at on this team and see those are the two people that are the true threats. But everybody else on this team, and you saw it yesterday, they can shoot the lights out beyond the arc. They can play really good defense. They can just overall, I mean, they play good, consistent, flowing basketball. Like that's the best way I can really describe it. They'll make their mistakes every once in a while, but they just seem to bounce back better than a lot of other teams do. There's a lot of good chemistry on this team. And the big thing about this, too, is that you go into the NBA Finals and you're talking about having the possibility of having Tyler Hero back on that bench and possibly getting those reps in game. So you're adding another key piece that, I mean, he was a sixth man of the year last year. He was 20 points last year. Again, kind of slowed down a little bit since taking that starting role. But that's just another 3-point shooter that you're going to have to deal with, including Strauss and Caleb Martin. And Gabe Vincent, too. Gabe Vincent's been playing really good basketball. And, I mean, he's not necessarily in a position where he's putting up big stats, but his presence is still very well felt on the court, especially on the defensive side of the ball. We've been wrong about them all season, but, again, that goes back to saying that they have a 44-38 record. They were down 2 with, like, maybe 2-3, something like that with 2 minutes left in that elimination game that would have knocked them out of the playoffs completely. But you go back to the regular season, and I mean, this is a team that's been dealing with injuries the entire season. I mentioned in the last show is that out of the Celtics, the Heat, and the Nuggets, these are 3 teams that I think out of all the teams in the NBA have had such a deep chemistry because there's been such little change around these teams. So they've been able to work with each other year in and year out and continue to build that chemistry. And the Heat are in that exact same position. You see how injury affects them during the regular season. But you also see how this team is able to bounce back in the postseason and actually make something of that. They were the number 1 overall seed last year, and they did very little to change their roster. And again, it's the injury that shows that once a team is healthy, they can really make a move. And this is what this Miami Heat team is doing. And they make history as being the second team to make it to the NBA Finals as an 8th seed.